Let's continue exploring the basics of Vue by introducing directives. Directives in Vue allow us to add special reactivity to pieces of the rendered DOM. Let's see a directive in action. Now, let's adapt this instance code that we started out with from the last time. However, rather than writing over this index.html, let's create a new folder called directives and create a new index.html file. That way we have multiple example references. So new folder, directives, and then index.html. Now you'll probably want to also create an instance folder. So instance. And then let's go ahead and move the previous index.html right into the instance folder. Great. Now we'll go ahead and copy this whole thing and place it into new index.html within the directives. And there we go. We have our index.html loaded for our directives folder. Now let's modify our code a little bit. Our Vue instance div with the ID of app will now have an inner div that has some directive functionality added to it. Create a new div and let's give it a reactive attribute. So right within, we'll say div. And for our reactive attribute, we'll use something called vbind title equals random. Then within the div, we'll say hover over me for your random number. Excellent. Now notice the v syntax, which denotes a Vue directive in the HTML. Now we're making the title attribute reactive for this element, and the title is what appears when you hover over elements of a web page. And then we're assigning it the random portion of our data. Now, the only problem is we don't have random declared in our data. So let's do that now. So let's change this text to a random piece. Then we'll map it to a combination of JavaScript functions, which will give us a random number from 1 and 50, including 1 and 50. So we'll say math.floor, math.random times 50. So math.random gives us a decimal from 0 to 1. We'll multiply that by 50, and then we'll floor it. So that way any decimal number just gets completely rounded to the lower integer. Then we'll add 1, so that way we include 1 to 50 instead of 0 to 49. Now as we save, we go to the directives, and we reload just to make sure everything's properly working. Now hover over me for the random number, and boom, there's a 28 appearing. Let's do it again. So I'm going to reload so that way we get a fresh number. And this time it's a 31. Awesome. Now we can show that this is truly reactive by inspecting the element. So let's go ahead and do a control inspect, go to the console element. Once again, I'll zoom in to make sure that this is visible. And now we can directly access the app instance. So let's say app.random equals 100, for example. Boom. As I hover over the element, now it says 100. All right, let's quickly look at another directive, the vif attribute, which allows us to achieve a conditional rendering in Vue. Add a shown property to the data object, and let's map it to a Boolean variable, which is false. Then on the random element, add a vif and set it to that shown attribute. So we'll say vif, and let's just reorder this so that way it looks neat. And vif equals shown. And once again, we have that v dash syntax for our directive. Now as we save, since shown is false, our element disappears. But if we say app.shown is equal to true, there we go, our element then reappears. All right, directives will serve as one of the primary ways we interact with Vue to create applications. The vbind directive will be fundamental for reactivity, and the vif will be instrumental in conditional rendering. All right, with this intro to directives done, we can continue learning Vue.